Welcome to How to Render Materials. This is part one of a three-part series. Okay, so these are some examples of materials rendering, and we look at why we render. So there's to increase visual appeal, to show your materials knowledge, and to help your communication grade. These particular ones, so the first couple on the left-hand side have been sketching a little bit of plastics materials, and the one on the right-hand side is sketching a piece of brushed aluminium. And we're also going to be having a look at some pine material, as these three materials are things that are going to come up quite often in your design technology lessons. So let's take these ones away. Okay, so you should be familiar with the next image we show you. So this is an isometric cube, and we've just used some very simple three-tone shading to illustrate different bits of light and shade. So we're going to start off with the light source, which we can see here at the top, just to illustrate where that's coming from. And the direction of the light hitting this cube is going to be kind of coming down in this direction. So the idea being is that your top layer is nice and bright, your left-hand layer is sort of in shade, and the right-hand layer is in deep shadow. So we need to remember this when we start to render our ideas. Now, you've got a sheet like this with you, and you're going to use that to help to render some different materials. We're going to start off with some acrylic. I don't have a blue pencil with me, so we're going to be working with the green one at the moment, but actually the color doesn't matter. We're just looking to create a finish that is usually described as either matte or glossy when we talk about plastics. And the first thing we're going to be doing is looking to see which direction our bands of colour that you can see reflected in the surface of the plastic are going to be heading in. Now I'm kind of liking heading in this direction. You'll notice I'm quickly sketching them in using the colour that I'm going to be using. I'm not going to use an oil pencil because that would be too in your face. Bear in mind you can move your page around so that you can access it more easily. So we're going to start off by just blocking in the side. So this is the left hand side. This is going to be our medium level of shade. So I'm blocking this in. I'm using the side of the pencil because it's much quicker and easier and you don't get the scratchy finish. So I've got the same on both of those two ends. Now we know from the cube we looked at a minute ago that actually this end is going to be a lot darker. So we're just going to make that a lot darker there. And knowing which way the light's coming from the top, like we've got in our an isometric cube, we know that there's going to be a little bit more shade towards the bottom of this piece of material. So we're going to start filling that in and bringing that up, and we're going to kind of blend that in. It shouldn't be as dark as the section on the right hand side, so I'm actually going to use a slightly darker green to just go over that and make that darker to indicate that level of shadow that's happening over here. But you will notice that I've left the top line quite free. Now, you can definitely use a ruler to help you doing this, because actually we want to get these really stark white lines. So as I start to colour in, I'm keeping the ruler in place, and it's purely just a bit of a blocker to stop me from colouring over that section. It means I can work a little bit more quickly. Now, obviously we've sped the video up at this point, but you know, so I won't be expecting you to colour this quickly, but at the same stroke it is just about laying down this colour and building it up, going over and over and over. And you'll notice I'm still leaving a little bit of a gap at this corner because I want to leave this looking a little bit shiny. So once we've got all the colour we can, and I'm really colouring right up to the ruler here, in a minute we're going to take this away and you should hopefully see that there's quite a stark line left over that hasn't been coloured at all. Okay, so you can see a definite difference there. So I'm just going to keep blending this, and this is an ongoing thing. You need to keep coming back over it. So again, I'm going to turn my ruler around because I want this patch of white that's really, really, you know, not got any colour on it at all. And again, I'm going to use my ruler and start to colour towards it to get that stark line, stopping just before the corner and blocking that away to the next line that I've got indicated. Okay, so you can see this really clear band of white there, and we're going to have the same happening down here. So I'm just making sure that's right up to the ruler, and then we're going to colour all of this end in, because obviously we need some amount of colour because this is a coloured piece of plastic, so it can't just be left white like our isometric cube was. So we're just going to keep working over this, and this is something that you need to just work on, experiment with, and try and build up over time. And there we've got two nice sort of light marks there going on. Now, to show a bit more of a 3D edge, I'm using the edge of my ruler to add some darker tones here, and it's just to give a little bit of color separation because you'd naturally get this kind of blending of different lights and darks and some stark lines and some more muted lines, and it really is something you're just going to have to keep working over and over and over and building up that color. You don't want to press really hard to start with and get really stark lines. You want to build them up and spend some time. I am using slightly circular strokes here with my pencil, which helps me to blend the colour a little bit more. It's still looking quite stark at the minute, so we'll go back over it in a minute or two and just kind of make sure that that is sort of muted back a little bit because we're going for a more matte finish. Now the next thing, because it's a piece of plastic, I'm going to use my pen and I'm going to start adding some sort of darker lines to the outside. So I'm trying to keep these fairly thick and I'm stopping just before the corners because I'm going to round them ever so slightly just to show again that this is a slightly rounded plastic material. Okay, so remember this is an acrylic, which is usually quite a glossy thing, so your example will be acrylic, but you can adapt it as you wish. I'm going for a slightly more matte finish here than I could do, and just rounding the corners ever so slightly, not very much at all, but it's just a tiny, tiny bit just to give that a slightly more kind of rounded, more plasticky feel. Now then, we've used some stark lines on the outside, but you really don't want stark lines on the inside, so you want to be using some thin lines. So we use thick lines for the outside, thin lines for the inside, and that gives us that sense of depth. After that, it's just a case of just blending even more, and I'm using that other colour of green just to add a little bit more depth to some of my shine lines, and it is just a case of just working over and over it. And one thing that I tend to find really, really helps me is if I'm finding that these are too aggressive, just use a rubber or an eraser, if you call it its proper name. Just go back over what you've been colouring in and it can start to mute them back and kind of help you to blend those a little bit. It can also help you to rub out sections. So as I said before, I wanted a little bit of a white edge to what I'm colouring because it actually gives it that slightly more shiny appearance.